Section 16 of Villette by Charlotte Bronte. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Leanne Fortune, Section 16. Behind the house at the roof was set, there was a garden, large, considering that it lay in the heart of a city, and to my recollection at this day it seems pleasant. But time, like distance, lends to certain scenes an influence so softening, and where all is stone around, blank wall and hot pavement, how precious seems one shrub, how lovely an enclosed and planted spot of ground! There went a tradition that Madame Beck's house had in old days been a convent, that in years gone by, how long gone by I cannot tell, but I think some centuries, before the city had overspread this quarter, and when it was tilled ground and avenue, and such deep and leafy seclusion as ought to embosom a religious house, that something had happened on this site which, rousing fear and inflicting horror, had left to the place the inheritance of a ghost story. A vague tale went of a black and white nun, sometimes on some night or nights of the year, seen in some part of this vicinage. The ghost must have been built out some ages ago, for there were houses all round now, but certain convent relics, in the shape of old and huge fruit trees, yet consecrated the spot, and at the foot of one, a Methuselah of a pear tree, dead, all but a few boughs which still faithfully renewed their perfumed snow in spring, and their honey-sweet pendants in autumn, you saw, in scraping away the mossy earth between the half-bared roots, a glimpse of slab, smooth, hard, and black. The legend went, unconfirmed and unaccredited, but still propagated, that this was the portal of a vault, imprisoning deep beneath that ground, on whose surface grass grew and flowers bloomed, the bones of a girl whom a monkish conclave of the drear Middle Ages had here buried alive for some sin against her vow. Her shadow it was that tremblers had feared through long generations after her poor frame was dust, her black robe and white veil that, for timid eyes, moonlight and shade had mocked, as they fluctuated in the night wind through the garden thicket. Independently of romantic rubbish, however, that old garden had its charms. On summer mornings I used to rise early to enjoy them alone, on summer evenings to linger solitary, to keep tryst with the rising moon, or taste one kiss of the evening breeze, or fancy rather than feel the freshness of dew descending. The turf was verdant, the gravelled walks were white, sun-bright nasturtiums clustered beautiful about the roots of the doddered orchard giants. There was a large berceau, above which spread the shade of an acacia. There was a smaller, more sequestered bower, nestled in the vines which ran all along a high and grey wall, and gathered their tendrils in a knot of beauty, and hung their clusters in loving profusion about the favoured spot where jasmine and ivy met and married them. Doubtless at high noon, in the broad vulgar middle of the day, when Madame Beck's large school turned out rampant, and externés and pensionnaires were spread abroad, vying with the denizens of the boys' college close at hand, in the brazen exercise of their lungs and limbs, doubtless then the garden was a trite, trodden-down place enough. But at sunset, or the hour of salute, when the externés were gone home, and the boarders quiet at their studies, pleasant was it then to stray down the peaceful alleys, and hear the bells of St. Jean Baptiste peal out with their sweet, soft, exalted sound. I was walking thus one evening, and had been detained farther within the verge of twilight than usual, by the still deepening calm, the mellow coolness, the fragrant breathing with which flowers no sunshine could win now answered the persuasion of the Jew. I saw by a light in the oratory window that the Catholic household were then gathered to evening prayer, a rite from attendance on which I now and then, as a Protestant, exempted myself. "One moment longer," whispered Solitude and the summer moon. "Stay with us. All is truly quiet now. For another quarter of an hour your presence will not be missed. The day's heat and bustle have tired you. Enjoy these precious minutes." The windowless backs of houses built in this garden, and in particular the whole of one side, was skirted by the rear of a long line of premises, being the boarding houses of the neighboring college. This rear, however, was all blank stone, with the exception of certain attic loopholes high up, opening from the sleeping rooms of the women servants, and also one casement in a lower story said to mark the chamber or study of a master. But, though thus secure, an alley, which ran parallel with the very high wall on that side the garden, was forbidden to be entered by the pupils. It was called, indeed, l'allée défendue, and any girl setting foot there would have rendered herself liable to as severe a penalty as the mild rules of Madame Beck's establishment permitted. Teachers might indeed go there with impunity, but as the walk was narrow, and the neglected shrubs were grown very thick and close on each side, weaving overhead a roof of branch and leaf, which the sun's rays penetrated but in rare checkers, this alley was seldom entered even during day, and after dusk was carefully shunned. From the first I was tempted to make an exception to this rule of avoidance. The seclusion, the very gloom of the walk, attracted me. For a long time the fear of seeming singular scared me away, but by degrees, as people became accustomed to me and my habits, and to such shades of peculiarity as were ingrained in my nature, shades certainly not striking enough to interest, and perhaps not prominent enough to offend, but born in and with me, and no more to be parted with than my identity, by slow degrees I became a frequenter of this straight and narrow path. I made myself gardener of some tintless flowers that grew between its closely ranked shrubs. I cleared away the relics of past autumns, choking up a rustic seat at the far end, borrowing of Goton, the cuisinier, a pail of water and a scrubbing brush. I made this seat clean. Madame saw me at work, and smiled approbation, whether sincerely or not I don't know, but she seemed sincere. "Voyez-vous," cried she, "comme elle est propre! Cette demoiselle Lucy, vous aimez donc cette allée, miss?" "Yes," I said, "it is quiet and shady." "C'est juste!" cried she with an air of bonté, and she kindly recommended me to confine myself to it as much as I chose, saying that as I was not charged with the surveillance, I need not trouble myself to walk with the pupils, only I might permit her children to come there to talk English with me. On the night in question, I was sitting on the hidden seat, reclaimed from fungi and mould, listening to what seemed the far-off sounds of the city. Far off, in truth, they were not. This school was in the city's centre, hence it was but 5 minutes' walk to the park, scarce 10 to buildings of palatial splendour. Quite near were wide streets brightly lit, teeming at this moment with life. Carriages were rolling through them to balls or to the opera, the same hour which tolled curfew for our convent, which extinguished each lamp, and dropped the curtain round each couch, rang for the gay city about us, the summons to festal enjoyment. Of this contrast I thought not, however. Gay instincts my nature had few. Ball or opera I had never seen. and though often I had heard them described, and even wished to see them, it was not the wish of one who hopes to partake a pleasure, if she could only reach it, who feels fitted to shine in some bright distant sphere, could she but thither win her way. It was no yearning to attain, no hunger to taste, only the calm desire to look on a new thing. A moon was in the sky, not a full moon, but a young crescent. I saw her through a space in the boughs overhead. She and the stars, visible beside her, were no strangers where all else was strange. My childhood knew them. I had seen that golden sign with the dark globe in its curve, leaning back on azure beside an old thorn at the top of an old field, in old England, in long past days, just as it now leaned back beside a stately spire in this continental capital. Oh, my childhood! I had feelings, passive as I lived, little as I spoke, cold as I looked, when I thought of past days. I could feel. About the present, it was better to be stoical. About the future, such a future as mine, to be dead. And in catalepsy and a dead trance, I studiously held the quick of my nature. At that time, I well remember whatever could excite. Certain accidents of the weather, for instance, were almost dreaded by me, because they woke the being I was always lulling, and stirred up a craving cry I could not satisfy. One night a thunderstorm broke. A sort of hurricane shook us in our beds. The Catholics rose in panic, and prayed to their saints. As for me, the tempest took hold of me with tyranny. I was roughly roused and obliged to live. I got up and dressed myself, and creeping outside the casement close by my bed, sat on its ledge, with my feet on the roof of a lower adjoining building. It was wet, it was wild, it was pitch dark. Within the dormitory they gathered round the night lamp in consternation, praying loud. I could not go in. Too resistless was the delight of staying with the wild hour, black and full of thunder, pealing out such an ode as language never delivered to man, too terribly glorious, the spectacle of clouds, split and pierced by white and blinding bolts. I did long, achingly, then and for 24 hours afterwards, for something to fetch me out of my present existence, and lead me upwards and onwards. This longing, and all of a similar kind, it was necessary to knock on the head, which I did, figuratively, after the manner of Jael to Sisera, driving a nail through their temples. Unlike Sisera, they did not die. They were but transiently stunned, and at intervals would turn on the nail with a rebellious wrench. Then did the temples bleed, and the brain thrill to its core. To-night I was not so mutinous, nor so miserable. My Sisera lay quiet in the tent, slumbering, and if his pain ached through his slumbers, something like an angel, the ideal, knelt near, dropping balm on the soothed temples, holding before the sealed eyes a magic glass, of which the sweet, solemn visions were repeated in dreams, and shedding a reflex from her moonlight wings and robe over the transfixed sleeper, over the tent threshold, over all the landscape lying without. Jael, the stern woman, sat apart, relenting somewhat over her captive, but more prone to dwell on the faithful expectation of Heber coming home, by which words I mean that the cool peace and dewy sweetness of the night filled me with a mood of hope, not hope on any definite point, but a general sense of encouragement and heart ease. Should not such a mood, so sweet, so tranquil, so unwonted, have been the harbinger of good? Alas, no good came of it. Ay, presently the rude reel burst coarsely in, all evil grovelling and repellent as she too often is. Amid the intense stillness of that pile of stone overlooking the walk, the trees, the high wall, I heard a sound, a casement. All the windows here are casements opening on hinges, creaked. Ere I had time to look up and mark where, in which story, or by whom unclosed, a tree overhead shook, as if struck by a missile. Some object dropped prone at my feet. End of section 16. Recording by Leanne Fortune.